Yeah, oh yeah, all right. Here's our start to Vic Lagina, who we just rode with, and this guy is in Vegas, and he was a producer for 20 plus years in the porn industry with one of the largest companies in that realm that kind of created the industry as it is, and that was a very interesting ride.
You guys are in for a very interesting conversation. The book's titled Filthy. And if you are underage or you are easily triggered by discussion of the lives of people who are in the adult entertainment industry, you might want to skip this one because we don't, as you know, we don't hold back. We're not demure. There's things there's black boxes in here that could be irreparably ensconced in your consciousness. So if you're fragile or you're taking psychedelics right now, maybe listen to it later.
And it's also a very warm, personal ride with a gentleman who has some deep conscious experience.
Yeah, and he breaks a lot of the stereotypes of what you might think a producer of this type is like. Very warm, very funny, very human and compassionate man. And what a ride. Like you're in for a treat. So subscribe. Please support our sponsors at Blast and at the Compton Cowboys. And of course, drink Adrenochrome Cola for that refreshingly elite taste. We'll see you on the next one.
Sis, hallo?
Blijven.
Dus zeker wegen them.
Yoi ichinichi o.
Sitaki ubenza, anikasirikie.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And welcome to another episode of the Moped Outlaws. Today, our guest is Vic Lagina, author of Filthy, a tongue twister, and a mystery wrapped up in an enigma and an entertaining film, too, right? It's a book and a film.
No, it's not a film yet. That was just a book trailer that was shot. Yeah.
Okay. So in my mind, there's a whole movie going.
Well, in my mind too, and that's the whole point. That whole trailer you saw was originally supposed to be a movie because, over the course of my career, I had 2 studios and all I shot were movies that ended with a facial. And being a creative person with 2 film school degrees, 2 unnecessary film school degrees, I felt it would have been a crime not to shoot something creative before I vacated the 2nd studio and sold it. So we shot this project that was originally supposed to be a feature. The editor took fucking forever, and therefore I decided to just use what I had to cut a really good book trailer and finish the book while he was taking his sweet ass time.
So if you want to see that trailer, go to viclagina.com and check it out. It's well worth the trip over there, and we'll put the link in the show notes for you to do that. But first, stick around because we're going to find out some wild and crazy things, I think.
Maybe, yeah. I wondered, is Lagina your real last name?
Of course not. Not. Like, yeah, I mean, I thought about legally changing it to that just because I think it would be hilarious. But no, this was really Vic Lagina was created for the sole purpose of shooting porn. And I thought that if you're going to be in the porn industry, you cannot take yourself seriously. So your name should reflect that. And therefore, I am Vic Lagina.
All right.
And you don't refer to it as the adult film industry. You are perfectly happy calling it porn.
Porn, smut, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many adult film awards have you won?
0.0. I've been nominated, but it wasn't about the awards for me. I know a lot of the dipshits in my industry take it very seriously and they get all dolled up and they go to the awards and it's like the biggest thing. I literally spent 0.5. I went to 0.5 award shows in my entire 20-year career because that point 0.5 was so dreadful and so mind melting that I couldn't take it anymore. And the funniest thing is that my book, Filthy, was nominated for an AVN this year for Best Mainstream Venture of the Year. And I considered going. However, they wanted to charge me to go.
Oh, man.
And so I didn't go. And it's a good thing I didn't because, spoiler alert, I didn't win. And they announced the award via PowerPoint presentation. So there was no speech. I wouldn't have been able to talk the mad shit that I wanted to if it actually happened.
Well, talk the mad shit. Like, what is it you would have to say? Like, let's imagine that somehow, some way, your constituency there are listening today. What is it you want to tell those folks?
First off, Brazzers sucks. You could do a lot better in porn these days with your hard-earned porn dollars. And I would tell everyone not to take themselves so damn seriously. Like, the amount of ego that was in this business, it was astounding to me. Because, we are basically all of the rejects of life. We are the ones who took the wrong turns. I can admit it. I took many a wrong turns that led me here. I was a promising young man that made some bad decisions that got myself into debt. But, I used porn to get me out of debt. And once I did get out of debt, I had this fledgling business. And because I was a businessman and because I came from corporate and commercial production, I knew how to run this thing like a professional, which I think is very important in porn. Just because we're in porn, it doesn't make us savages,
Yeah. And it's an industry that actually has gross revenues that are right now better than Hollywood. Is that correct?
I haven't checked with my accountant on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Although I have to tell you, where the money is going these days, it's very interesting. You had this massive pendulum shift in 2020 during the pandemic when everyone was home jerking off. And what wound up happening was that the monies that were usually going towards the studios started shifting to the actual creators on OnlyFans. And that side of the business, they call it mainstream porn, which I hate that term because there's nothing mainstream about porn. So I call it studio porn. But the studios took a big hit. And that was effectively when my career ended with Brazzers. It's just, they didn't handle it very well. So fuck them. And Brazzers sucks.
So Brazzers is a studio?
What's that?
Brazzers is a studio?
Yeah, it's a company. It was a company that is under a porn monopoly that is now called ALO. It is now under fourth ownership. It's a little nebulous as to whether the previous owners are still tied. Some say yes, they say no. But then it was MindGeek before them. They were the worst of the worst. They sucked all the joy from the job. Before that, it was called Manwin. And before that was called Mansif. So you've got a company that's been in existence for like 20 years that has rebranded 4 times. Tell me there's not something wrong with this entity.
Right. And you were both in the performance side, the talent side, and then in the production side.
Just the production side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, living out of that trailer has me completely befuddled. So
yeah, no. There was a time I contemplated doing that during the pandemic when we were all adjusting a little bit and pivoting. Yeah. But the reality of the situation is that I found that I didn't really trust the new crop of performers. So why on earth would I stick my dick in them? It just seemed like a bad idea. And on top of it all, I did make a promise to my father when I got into the business that I would not be in front of camera. His exact words were, look, I don't have a problem with the porn industry. You can make a lot of money. Just don't let me see you on screen. And I thought that was fair. I mean, I got his support. So, just don't be like a porn star. And I thought that was fair. And you know what? I think I had just as much fun being on the other side of the camera and having my personal rendezvous with these performers rather than putting it all out to the world to see my, hairy ass and butthole. I mean, I wouldn't exactly spread cheeks or anything like that. And my ass really isn't that hairy, but you get what I'm saying.
We
Yeah.
do.
Thank you for that terrible image I will never get out of my head.
Yeah, well, it happens a lot in the industry. I have seen some shit, man, that would scar you two gentlemen for life.
There's a quick story. When I was in Amsterdam, there's the erotic museum there.
Uh-huh.
Fabulous place, really wonderful, great art. There was this one black box that was probably about like 6 by 6, painted black, just looked shabby, warning signs all over it. I thought it was a tourist trap. I was like, oh yeah, whatever. Walked in, scarred for life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, have you seen a prolapsed anus before, ever?
Well, it was probably in there. What I remember is a woman straddling a fire hydrant.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, the prolapse anus was my Achilles heel. Now you get better as time goes on. You become at one with your PTSD. Prolapse trauma deficiency syndrome or whatever. But it was you get that, certain smells, poop, when you have a really messy anal scene. These are the things that we spare the viewers.
Thank you.
No smell-o-vision in porn.
Yeah, fortunately in your case.
What would you say are the actual medical risks of being a performer in the porn industry?
Well, I mean, look, you're gonna be exposed to herpes, no doubt at all, because the majority of people in the industry, whether they want to admit it or not, if they were to administer HSV2 tests, most people would come out positive. Now, they don't test for that because then there wouldn't be a lot of people that would be able to shoot. And they don't tell many performers coming in that is an actual risk, which they should. But besides the new and improved STDs, now it's a little different than when I was in it. There was a hard line. If you were a gay performer, you were on the gay side. If you were a straight performer, you were on the straight side. Now that line has been blurred. That's another thing we can chalk up to the pandemic, when the whole country just went a little meshuggah and everyone was working with everyone. And now, you have performers who have tested positive for HIV, but because of the viral medications, they're viral inhibitors, and they could pass an HIV test and not have and not potentially expose their partners. Now, as a dude, if you go in knowing with that knowledge, is your dick gonna work? Mine wouldn't at all. So these are the certain things you have to deal with. Now, another big one is, too much anal. Too much anal, too frequent. That could cause problems. It could cause your butthole to fall out and continue to fall out. So it would require stitching and surgery to stay up there.
Jesus Christ.
Wow. So how does this all come together in you deciding to write a book?
So around 2015, I was still nursing a pretty strong cocaine habit. I wouldn't call it an addiction. It was a habit. I was abusing the drug just because we were very busy, and it was a performance enhancing drug, no doubt. But at the time, I was getting through another dysfunctional relationship, and the details were starting to get a little muddy. So I felt it was important to at least get the start of the journey to where we were then in 2015, get it in a tangible form in a journal of sorts. And then what I would continue to do is, as long as the journey was continuing, I would add to it, especially when we would have a shutdown for HIV or something else, and there was a moratorium. And I would continue editing it. And I didn't know how long the journey would last. I didn't think it would ever last 20 years, but it did. And once I sold my studio and I had enough money to retire and walk away from this ridiculous, silly business, I felt it was very important to write a tell-all, to release it as a tell-all, because quite simply, I didn't give a fuck anymore. I didn't give a fuck of who I offended. I didn't give a fuck about the company I worked for. The truth is that when I was gone and done, and because I was no longer in a position to give people jobs, those that I spent time with, like even on a very intimate level, who spent time in this house with me, wouldn't return my text, even if it was like, hey, how are you doing? How is your mental health? Nothing, ghosted. And it was like, you know what? Fuck these people. Let's just write a tell-all and just kind of blast the entire industry.
That's crazy. So you found out that your intimate friendships were solely based on the industry, not really on you.
Well, it was based on, wanting to get our mutual nut, I would say. Look, there was sexual chemistry before and attraction. And to be honest with you, like, I tried to date outside the industry and I failed miserably. And a lot of my bad relationships were because I made a lot of concessions and compromises with the partners that I was with. And so my love life was a travesty. I guess arguably still is, even though I'm so far removed from the industry. So I was looking for meaningful personal connections. I can't even say it without laughing, within the industry. But the truth is, it's like, it's okay. I'll put it to you like this way. When you go out on dates in the civilian world, you go through this courting ritual, right? Where you're going out with them and you're trying to see like, oh, do we get along? Are we cool? But you're thinking in the back of your mind, what does she look like naked? What does her vagina look like? What does her vagina smell like and taste like? Is she good in sex, right? You want to know all these things. In porn, it's the complete opposite. Like they're doing like an audition on screen for you ahead of time. And then you have to figure out, well, after I nut, am I still going to want this person around? And that's, it was such a mind fuck in that regard. But the truth is that, I don't know. I mean, sex in the industry came easy. It wasn't like I was trying to get laid. The truth is I was a very professional person. We were there to work. I wasn't there to hit on anyone. I wasn't there to get laid. I wasn't there to be sleazy or creepy. I wouldn't have had a 20-year career if I was, because you get rooted out pretty quickly. But the interesting dynamic is when you're not paying attention to the girl in that way, which she is so used to being accustomed to, and you're just hanging back and you're being cool and you're being professional. Well, then they're like, do you want my number to hang out sometime? I'll be like, yeah, that'd be cool. And, we'd go out for dinner and I was always a gentleman about it, but it led to a lot of sexual encounters in the industry. And what was I going to do? Say no to have sex with hot porn stars? Yeah.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. When you think back to the 12-year-old boy and he's looking forward and going, okay, that's where I'm going, would you continue forward? Like,
you mean, okay, so if older me visited my 12-year-old self,
right,
and said, hey, young Vic, get in the DeLorean, I'm going to show you something cool, I wouldn't do that because that's weird. But the truth is, would it have changed my trajectory any?
Right.
I don't know, man. I mean, I can imagine, when your hormones are raging at that age, you'd be like, wow, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. But it wasn't like I aspired to be this. It just happened. And I just kind of rode the wave for as long as it lasted.
So
Right.
part of that is that you got educated in how to do production. And I imagine that most of that was from the standpoint of videography as opposed to film, right?
Yes. Well, so I went to Syracuse University for 4 years. They have a really good communication school. I got my degree in TV and film production. After freezing, I went south to Miami, and then I was working for a corporate and commercial video company as a PA. And then I decided to enroll in a 2-year MFA program for TV and film production again, while elevating myself as an editor and a producer of corporate videos. The funny thing about that second degree is just because you have it, now you can teach college. So I was teaching college after that. So I was really well versed in production, not so much on the shooting side of things. I always had a cameraman. But when, the wheels fell off in Los Angeles, when I was trying to make it as a legitimate filmmaker. And I was getting myself into debt, which was another story altogether. When I got into the industry, I realized that I had to run camera too. So I got better at it. And as time went on, I got really good at operating camera. So yeah, I was a man of all hats. I was running the entire show, running an 8-person crew, producing, directing, breaking down the scripts, dealing with the constant bullshit from the head office. And that was my job. And I was really, really good at it. You know, I was a manager of chaos, really. And, you know, I guess because of some of the decisions I made, like buying this house in Vegas when the economy was about to take a shit in a big way, my back was against the wall. So I was working like a motherfucker, and I was really good at it. And I mean, and they kept us very busy. You know, the different iterations of the company had a different vibe altogether, and it just got progressively worse as time went on. But in the early days, dare I say, it was fun and exciting and wild.
Yeah,
You
I'm
hear
mostly want
stories about the 70s, like with the Mitchell brothers and that kind of vibe of what was they created. Like they were the ones who created the feature film as a porn, right?
I don't know. Not really. I need to brush up.
When did you start doing this, Vic?
So early 2000s, which was the dawn of the internet. At that time, the features were still the big thing, the DVDs, you know, and internet was kind of like looked at like, you know, it's internet, whatever. But I got in with the dudes that changed it forever. Literally, they knew how to market porn on the internet, and they were a cool group of guys from Montreal, and they liked what I did. I didn't fuck with their money, and they wanted to kind of prop me up and build around me. And so they did. They just said, you know, if you want to get out of Miami and you want to start tapping in to the LA talent pool, we will keep you very busy. But I didn't want to live in LA again because it's very hard to get ahead in LA. So I set up shop here in Las Vegas. And, you know, my money went a lot further.
So in terms of telling all about the industry, one of the things that's been part of some of the, you know, various documentaries I've seen about that industry is that there's kind of a fixed rate for the performer. Like typically I've seen it quoted as $5,000. And of course there's greater numbers than that, depending on who's the star, et cetera, et cetera. But there's generally, like any other visual production, there's a fixed budget for the process. And then you, as the multiple hat wearing 8-person chaos wrangling guy, there's your fee, right? And then what's the relationship between the production cost, including talent and crew, and what the net for the production facility was as a percentage? I don't need you to talk about the, like, you made 10 million and they made 100 million, whatever, but just like, what's the difference between what you got paid and the artists, the actors got paid, and the crew? And was it even close to union? Like, your camera people getting paid well? Are there any kind of union protections for people where, you know, 4 and a break or any of that?
Union protections. That's a good one, man. Yeah, I mean, listen, the industry has tried to unionize, but they are very self-centered, all about themselves, not organized enough to do it. There is a union, but it's kind of a joke with no teeth in it. But to answer your question, you know, yeah, there was a one-time fee for a while, and that incrementally got bigger as time went on. But I'll tell you, like, when I was back in Florida, okay, girls were getting paid $500 for a boy-girl scene. The dudes were getting paid $200. Now, when I got to Vegas, that leveled up a little bit. Girls were getting paid $800, $900, $1,000 for a boy-girl, maybe an extra $200, like $1,200 for a boy-girl anal. And that's how it was for a while. But then when Brazzers just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and when they became the only money, or were one of the biggest companies, they were getting, I don't want to say gouged, but a lot of agents got wise to the fact that there was a Brazzers rate versus the rest of the industry rate. That's what was going on. But really the bigger picture is, okay, so yes, they're getting paid this one-time fee. And then, you know, the company gets to exploit that content for eternity in, you know, by definition.
Yeah, but
so
as a producer, it's as a tech person,
Right.
what's the relationship between the artist money and and your money and then the profit? Like, where are you in that scale? Because I imagine you're working more consistently, so it's
Mhm.
actually probably a little bit less per boy girl scene for the production crew.
Um, You'd be surprised, man. I was getting paid on par with a lot of the talent that was
Okay.
going on per scene. Just because, I guess, because of all the hats I was wearing, and because essentially, I was a liability manager, because I was the boots on the ground here in the United States for a company that was in Canada. So, yes, they're paying me a one-time fee for that particular day, but they're also paying a tax because I'm shielding them from liability. And I'm making judgment calls on a daily basis of, we need to do this a certain way because we're going to protect ourselves from injury. We're going to protect ourselves from potential lawsuits, any of those stuff. Yeah. So that's where, and I was on, basically on 18 hours a day. So that deserved a little bit higher rate as well. So yeah, I was well compensated, and because there was a bullshit to dollar ratio in my mind, that's what kept me going for as long as I did.
Now, I know, Greg, you have another question, but I want to follow this thread for just another second.
Mm.
There are stories of made men, and that Vegas operated a little bit like New York in some ways. And there's been this sort of recognition that in illicit industries like the drug trade or the porn industry, or we'll call it the professional dating industry,
Wait, but porn isn't an illicit industry like drugs.
Well, wait, I don't mean to mischaracterize it, but what I'm getting at is some of the dangers of telling all means that some figures who don't necessarily play by the rules might get offended. What's the penetration of made men, if you will, in the industry?
Man, I'll be completely honest. I never dealt with any of that personally. I never got squeezed. I never got visited by goons. None of that ever happened. Now, there were rumors and Montreal has a pretty big presence in that regard. And during first ownership, this is during the Mansef era, this is when I was told they were getting visited at their headquarters by them. And I had wondered if, they were getting shaken down. I was led to believe that the original owners, were ready to start families and they didn't want to deal with it anymore. My feeling is they were getting squeezed a little bit, so they wound up selling. So I think there was always some sort of influence, but not directly with the people I was working with, at least from what I acknowledged or saw. They seemed more like tech people and internet people rather than sex industry people, the sex business people. It didn't rub me that way.
All right, so how you differentiated civilian life from the porn life? I don't know. I don't have a question. It's just interesting to me that, like, for instance, what Mark sort of touched on a bit is prostitution's illegal, but if you put a camera up, now you're not breaking the law.
Yeah, it's First Amendment, freedom of expression. It's a performance. That's the reality.
That's the legal elements of, wow.
Thanks to Larry Flint.
That was exactly what I was going to say, man. 100%. Larry Flint paved the way for all of us in this industry. And I think in some regards, he might be rolling in his grave right now with how the industry has changed and turned. But yeah, man, the guy took a bullet and lost the ability to walk because he really fought for the First Amendment and the performance aspect of it. Now it's turning into something different where you're getting pushback on that and you're getting the laws written of age verification. And in some instances, I saw this guy in Utah propose some sort of bill that wants to make all porn illegal. And, the industry always freaks out about this. And I'm like, people, just take it easy. Porn is not going anywhere. A lot of things, a lot of the states that have those age verification laws, Pornhub and fuck them too for a variety of reasons. They just stopped. They denied access to those states because they don't want to comply with the law.
Which brings us to this idea of trafficking. Like
Yep.
one of the reasons for that is that there is this potential anyway for women to be brought in to really compromising positions and threatened with lots of violence, or maybe they're recruited in places and then brought into the United States and they're under a lot of pressure not to get deported and sort of stuff like that. And one would think that that's a big issue in that industry, and that it's a really inhumane way to treat people. Do you tell anything about that in your book? Is there anything in your book about trafficking and the relationship between?
Yeah. So a lot of what went down, and there's a book on my bookshelf. I don't know if you can see it. It's called Takedown. It's by Lila Micklethwait. And she was the driving force behind the whole takedown movement, behind the whole trafficking hub movement. The reason why Pornhub is in such disarray right now, the reason why the porn monopoly that I work for is taking major hits right now, and in my estimate will be broken up within 3 years or less. But the truth is that, yeah, the way, according to her book, of course, the way that the website was set up, the user-generated platform that is Pornhub, was that anyone could upload anything and monetize that content. Now, as a dude like myself who's got morals and standards and wanted to maintain my soul during the industry, which is why I ran a business above board, it never occurred to me that this is how people would behave. And it never occurred to me that the company would allow this to happen. You figure with the rigid standards that we were under for compliance, which was making sure there were 2 different forms of government issued IDs, there were entry videos, there were exit videos, there were things we were told to look for, to listen to during these particular shoots, that they would allow, such a Wild West mentality to go on Pornhub, yet it did. And it was Layla Micklethwait who shined a light on it. And it was the New York Times op-ed columnist, Nicholas Kristof, who released that article in December of 2020, which then forced the credit card companies to pull all the transactions from Pornhub, forced them to purge a lot of the content. And now, which they called themselves ethical capital partners, when, there was a documentary on Netflix called Money Shot that debuted in early 2023.
I watched it.
Literally one day later, Pornhub and, MindGeek was sold. Literally to this 4th group. So yeah, they took a major hit. So now it's people are very much aware of it, yet the industry for the most part, and a lot of people are still very much patrons of Pornhub, which I can't wrap my head around. Like my relationship with them ended 2 months before that article came out. So if I was still with the company, I would have had some deep soul searching to do, to be like, do I really want to stay with this company? And fortunately, I didn't have to make that decision. By the pandemic, I was pretty much over it anyway, and felt I'd made enough and done enough. So, but I'm very outspoken about Pornhub and those who continue to support and be a patron of it.
And then additionally, there's the idea that one of the new paradigms is OnlyFans, which theoretically is about self-ownership, self-regulation, and the ability to put yourself in the positions you want to put yourself in, literally, to do things the way you want. And then the market drives your revenue. But is there something about OnlyFans that is they're harvesting the wealth from those participants? Do you understand the model, and what does that look like?
So I'm very much a fan of the creator platforms, because for the longest time, they were the ones on the front line, both mentally and physically, and they were getting paid a one-time fee by the studios, which we covered. But fortunately, they built up their brand while they were shooting company porn. So therefore, they have their fan base, and now they're making all of the money. And in that regard, I think it's great. I think there still is potential for people to abuse it, Well, you have someone with a iron fist who are wrangling a lot of these girls and forcing them to do content. And I think that needs to be addressed and looked after. But there is a bigger side to this, a more of a fraudulent side to OnlyFans, which is really the management aspect of it, where you have creators who have management teams. And they're the ones talking to the fans, not the performer. And because OnlyFans currently is a UK based company, they're not really subject to class action lawsuits within the United States. There have been class action lawsuits against the bigger management companies on behalf of the fans who felt duped by these teams. But these are the abuses within the system. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but there is an article in Bloomberg yesterday that an American company may buy OnlyFans for $8 billion. And if they do, I could tell you, I think there's a lot of lawyers salivating right now to take on those class action lawsuits and sue them. So my opinion is that there's going to be a reckoning, especially with a lot of these management companies.
So it's not as performer centric as we might like to believe. There's this element of these management companies still essentially driving compliance by the artist, by the performer, and
Yeah.
forcing them to continue to perform at a certain level, a certain frequency, in order to maintain the kind of financial flow that goes with that management arrangement.
Well, I don't know. I mean, look, there could be the forcing. In my experience, it's not a forced issue, but you have a situation where if someone is talking as the performer to a fan, that's textbook fraud right there. You can't do that. So in that regard, it's shady. Now, I think there should be degrees of management. You know, look, having known a lot of these women, some of them aren't as savvy or business oriented and need someone to streamline their work. And I think that's okay. I think to a certain extent, being a buffer between the fans who could be demanding, obnoxious, mean, hurtful, that's also important. But I think you got to draw the line on you cannot act like you are the performer because the performer is simply too busy or doesn't want to deal with it. That is where there's going to be the reckoning. I'm calling it now. You heard it here first. Assuming this sale does go through. And the question then becomes too is, OnlyFans has been trying to shy away from porn. They have been. They were going to do that, right. But then there was such an outcry from the industry because they built up that company. But the question is if it does go to an American company, will they just completely knock out porn? Because that is going to cut the legs out of so many people. It'll be, for me, it doesn't affect me, but for a lot of people I know, they're going to be freaking the fuck out.
We had a young woman on a few episodes ago who's in the industry, and I actually was surprised in researching her a bit how many other platforms like OnlyFans there are.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't even on OnlyFans. She was on some other.
Yeah, Fan Centro is another one. I know Snapchat Premium was one. I mean, a bunch of others cropped up because they were trying to take away from OnlyFans' thunder. And I know they were salivating when there was talk about OnlyFans like outlawing porn, but OnlyFans is still the king right now. I mean, there's loyal fans too. I mean, there's other ones that are going to work. It's just, it seems like the way OnlyFans is set up, it's very easy for management teams to exploit the system.
It's really great to have all this sort of insight into the mechanics of how this works. And what I'd like to do now is kind of deepen it and make it a little bit more personal. Mm-hmm. But I want to start by just recognizing how there's, in men's work particularly, there's a lot of high level awareness of how men who become addicted to the dopamine release that comes with porn are mm-hmm. suffering in their personal lives, and it handicaps them in their ability to create real relationships. Sure. I'm wondering if that's reflected in the story you told earlier a little bit about not really being sure how to date right now, and and what do you think of what this does to the end user?
Well, I think, listen, if you're in a relationship and you're jerking off to porn on the DL, it's probably a good idea to revisit your relationship and make adjustments. Because when I was in a relationship, I wasn't jerking off to porn. I was having sex with my girlfriend. I mean, that's just the way it was. Um, but yeah, I mean, listen, I had thought about taking the filthy tour on the road and talking to students and college students and the young people to kind of just explain to them that porn is not real. Porn is a fantasy. The facial is not the proper finishing move. You know, these are all things that were created simply to fulfill a fantasy for someone who may not be able to get laid, and that is their only sexual outlet. I think if you are negating your responsibilities as a parent or as a husband because you're so
Dopamine
cons-
addicted.
yeah, dopamine addicted, or just I think that's really what it is. I don't know if I buy into the whole porn addiction thing, but the dopamine release is definitely something to be discussed. But yeah, I think there's something to be said that yeah, you need to educate people on this sort of thing. I don't really feel that porn is the evil that a lot of people make it out to be. I've known couples who use it to enhance their relationship. But yeah, there's definitely a dark side, and I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done.
It seems like, just generally speaking in society, sex is one of those topics that it's people aren't comfortable with, you know, and it does seem like the health of society would be increased exponentially if we were just talking about it.
Yeah, well, look, man, I had sex ed in, I think, was it junior high or maybe a freshman year of high school, and it's very important to do that. I was in a good public school in the suburbs of Philly, and that was it. My dad never gave me the birds and the bees talk, quite thankfully, because that would have been very awkward. But look, today's society is much different than when all of us grew up, right? I of course, saw my father's Playboys. When I went to summer camp, the counselors had their smut. I mean, the Screw magazine and Hustler. I mean, these were like littered in the bunk sometimes. So that was my exposure to it. But look, when it comes to like where porn is now and the age verification laws, I look at it like this. Back in my day when I went to the video store, there was that whole sign that said adults only. And that was the rope, the velvet rope that you were only allowed to cross if you were of age. Now you don't have that. And it's so accessible with technology that I don't know. I mean, do you gentlemen have kids?
I have three kids. Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts about it in terms of, restrictions, laws, what?
It's a good question. My ex and I, our kind of rule of thumb for talking about it with our kids is if they asked a question, they were ready for an answer, and we didn't have to expound on it beyond an honest answer.
But what about like the porn issue and
Right.
access to porn and all that?
Um, God, I've always felt it was never really a taboo thing. I think, like with drugs, I would warn them there could be some potentials, and I'm no expert, but like you don't need to see two girls in a cup. I accidentally saw it, and I'm sorry I did. Or
Yeah,
like this place in Amsterdam, I've told them that experience I had. I was like, I'm sorry I saw that. I
yeah,
should have really. So I guess forewarning potentials.
yep. Yeah. I mean, look, I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about these sort of things. But to me, it seemed like good parenting, communication, age restriction on websites on in the internet of your home and all of that. But again, I think there has to be something to make it a little bit more difficult for someone to just jump on Pornhub or anything else.
My gut feeling is like you were saying, back when you and I were growing up, Hustler, spreading out the labia was just like, holy shit, what, that was
Yeah.
so taboo.
Right.
I think kids are always going to find that element, like hiding it. I don't know what would be. My gut instinct is making something more challenging actually entices one to it.
I suppose so. And there's this whole thing, there's the whole argument. The porn industry loves to say and generalize who the enemy is. Right-wing religious freaks that want to ban porn. And that's not the case at all. But the question then becomes is that, they make the argument, well, if you give an ID and you make them do that, well, then, there's personal information at risk and this and that. And I'm thinking, yeah, but you're taking people's credit card information when they join the website. How is that any fucking different? It's the same. So, and then you deal with like data breaches all the time with some of these big companies. So really, is that really the concern, or is there something else that we're not talking about and we're just kind of masking the whole personal information protection as like our defense of this situation?
So have you gone kind of deep into policies and protections in the industry?
I mean, people ask me about it all the time because of what I used to do for a living and what my thoughts are. And I think, yeah, I mean, look, if you need to present an ID and there's age restrictions on alcohol and cigarettes, is it porn? Is it really that unreasonable to ask for some sort of ID on that? I don't think so, because, again, back in our day, you had to be of a certain age to purchase it or go into an adult store,
Yeah. And I've just noticed, even I got a real ID just this week, and I've noticed that now DMV is digitizing the driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like security and with blockchain that there really is a high potential for protected ID online.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think the technology is there. I just think this is really what it is. Okay. Pornhub would take a huge hit in traffic if they had to abide by the laws in which someone had to enter their ID in order to gain access. If you want to ask what my opinion is on why they're fighting it so much, it's that right there, because the hit in traffic would be so severe, it would kill the business model. That's it in general. I think that's why a lot of adult sites are doing it. They may scream, invasion of privacy, free speech, whatever, but I think it's a bit bigger than that.
Was wondering this whole conversation, how is Pornhub making money? And you just opened my eyes. It's the advertising.
Of course, that's the only way they can do it now.
Right.
Once the credit cards were pulled and once they purged like 80 to 90% of the content, which, that number is up for debate, their traffic went down tremendously. And there are a lot of tube sites out there, and I think all of them have targets on their backs for the same very reason, but it's still very much the Wild West when it comes to the tube sites. And just recently, it's been a little more reined in.
Well, Facebook doesn't make as much off advertising as we'd like to think. And a big portion of the way they get revenue is from selling the data about the participants. There
Mhm.
must be a component for that on the Pornhub side. They must be gathering stats about people.
Absolutely. Well, look, when my brother is in digital advertising and data harvesting, okay, and I was talking over with him, like, why on earth would someone buy, like what happened with fourth ownership? Why would they buy a distressed asset like Pornhub? And he goes, for the data. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. So of course they are harvesting data on that. My feeling is, look, if you're going to go into what is the next stage in all of this, if you take the human element out of it, right? The trafficking element, the compliance, the consent aspect of it, and you go strictly AI, okay? And now you use this data, or you have a user You know what they search. Why don't you create them their own digital girlfriends based on what they want? And now they can just do whatever they want with their digital girlfriend. I think that's where this is going soon. And I think that is it. They really bought Pornhub for the data.
This is so funny because there's such a history of how technological advancements in audiovisual distribution were driven by sexual appetite, right? Like that's a real thing. And so in this case, you're saying the same thing, that AI is the next technological horizon. And as a result, sexual desire is going to be leveraged to gain more foothold in the production capacity of bridging that gap. I want to move away from this sort of abstract discussion and talk about, what was your journey like writing the book? How did it feel to sit and write pages and have the idea of, I've got to have an ending and all of that stuff come out? And in terms of getting a publisher, what was that journey like for you?
Well, so the publishing side of things, I had some consultants on this who have done the traditional publishing route versus the self-publishing route. And the way it was described to me was that the publishing houses are very much like record labels. And when it came to the money aspect of things, there would be a lot of creative accounting and it would never make money. That was kind of it. So that led me to wanting to do the self-publishing route. But in doing so, when you go the self-publishing route, you can't look self-published. It should look as professional, and you got to put a lot of resources behind it. Now, fortunately, I had those resources. So producing a book that is worthy of someone's bookshelf, that doesn't look like it was slapped together, was very important to me and my team. I had a whole team of lawyers advising me along the way. But the journey of it, it was interesting. Like, when the journey and the tale of Vic Lagina was ending, which was around the 2020 to 2022 phase, where the story was wrapping up, and not only my story was wrapping up, but the story of the third iteration of the company was wrapping up as well. That whole part of shedding the Vic Lagina skin, that was very therapeutic. Very cathartic in a lot of ways, because you take a step back and you really become introspective about the entire journey. And you start realizing a lot of things, my journey was definitely a shit show, especially when you factor the relationship aspect of it. But the fact that I had a front row seat to the company that changed porn forever also made it highly intriguing. However, is this enough to sustain a reader? I wasn't sure. So what I wound up doing was writing all of these side topics that would be interspersed. Like, you start reading about my journey. All right, let's take a break. Let's sidebar into this. And I wrote 9 lessons of Vic Lagina's School of Porn. There's a couple in there, like what to do when she's on her period, prepping for anal, squirt or pee, hygiene. Lesson 5 is my favorite chapter because I'm so passionate about it, because personally and professionally, it has gone awry in a lot of ways. So that was a good one. But then I also wrote about the people who died that I knew, and researching their demise and reading their obituaries and understanding how much pain they were in. That really made me understand why I was abusing drugs so much, because I was numbing myself to a lot of their energy and that I was absorbing on a daily basis. So, when it came to writing the book and finishing it, by the end of the time when I got it all out, I felt like a new man completely. Like, wow, rewired, reborn, reinvented in a lot of ways. So it was great in that sense.
Who needs ayahuasca?
I'll take some, but yeah.
So talk about a little bit, now that you've been out of this zone and you're semi-retired or whatever, what is it like for you? How are you spending your creative energy nowadays?
So, the book was a big part of it. The release of the book was a big part of it. The promotion of the book was a big part of it, and it's still going on. One of the things you take on when you become a self-published author is now you're taking on all the roles, much like I did when I was a producer and director for Brazzers. So the whole cracking the art of marketing this thing, it's an ongoing process. But one of the things I learned when I was at a book convention here in Vegas back in November was it's important to continue to keep creating. So what I'm doing now is on my Instagram, I've been doing these like quick blurbs where I take footage because I have pretty much all the scenes I shot from the last 15 years on hard drives because I'm meticulous like that. And so what I would do is like basically take a scene, do a 60-second or less narration about it, really talking a lot of shit about Brazzers because they were stupid enough not to put me under an NDA at all for some fucking reason when they had an opportunity to get me very cheap. And so I've been posting these things, but it seems like people are really interested in hearing those tales of when things go crazy on a production day. And a lot of times it's still fresh in my head. So that's what I'm working on. And it's still like an ongoing process. So that's what I'm doing these days. I'm still creating, and I guess fortunately or unfortunately still stuck sometimes in the Vic Lagina persona, which I can tell you he's a fucking dickhead that runs his mouth a lot, which is kind of the fun of it. But in some ways it's hard for me to move on to whatever the third act of my life is, to whatever this vessel is now, which sometimes I don't even know. But yeah, that's what I do. I hang out with my dogs every day. I get better at the piano you see back there. I am just very much a creative, starkly different than what I was when I was in the industry.
Why did you have to be that other persona in the industry?
Well, I think, maybe I embellish a little bit on the asshole side of things. I think now, because I basically nuked the bridge to the industry, that I kind of have to lean into it a little, because it's a little more fun. And I think that's what people expect of me. But when I was in it, I was a little more on the compassionate side, unless, of course, someone was fucking with my time, because I was very respectful of people's time. When they got off the plane, me, my crew, everyone, we're ready. We're ready for you. And you don't have to match my intensity, because I was kind of a lunatic when it came to preparation and being on point. But if someone were to show up and they were ready to go and they were just willing to trust me to make this a great day, which was going to be good for them, I was like, great, I will carry you the rest of the way. It's when people just didn't respect that and they made the day about them and their bullshit. That's when the dickhead had to come out, you know? And I was a manager. Yeah.
Are there productions, like you said, you tried Hollywood for a little while. Mm-hmm. Is there some kind of more a non-porn type of creative visual production that you've sort of kept in the back pocket, or that you're secretly would like to get made, a documentary or a feature film? Is there something like that cooking?
Yeah, look, being a creative, sure. If there is, when I was when I acted in the trailer, okay, that was a lot of fun. And even though we were putting together a production, and productions are stressful, forget about throwing sex on top of it. That's like throwing gas on a fire. But production's generally stressful. And I would tell you, I'm generally burnt out, where I'm not going to just take a job because it's production, because it's what I do. There's no passion for me in there. However, if there was something more where I was acting a little bit more, or, well, if anyone's listening and they want to make this into a TV show, this would be a really good TV show, because it's structured like 3 seasons of television. And the best part is it's all true. It all happened. So if there was someone out there, and this is what I am trying to manifest into the universe, which is someone to kind of get it, or they see it, because it's not your typical porn story or written by someone in the porn industry. Like, I've read when porn stars write their tomes, and they are vanity-driven drivel, because there's no teeth to it. There's no depth. There's no humanity. There's no rawness. There's no brutality. It's all in my book. Like, it really is. And I wanted to create a human story. And those who have read it, or who have listened to the audiobook, They reach out, they commend me, they go, dude, that was so good. Like, I commend you for being so honest, for putting yourself out there, because I know it wasn't easy. So I think there are people out there in Hollywood, especially when they are retreading the same bullshit over and over again. This is fresh. This is real. This happens. Let's do it, because that would actually give me a lot of joy and it would bring the juice back.
Wow. That's fantastic. Sort of like HBO, and call now. Go to at Vic Lagina and send a DM on X or Instagram, or just go to viclagina.com and make an offer.
Look, listen, I wouldn't really ask a lot for those rights. I really wouldn't, because I'm just more interested in seeing it get made than anything.
Would you want to be like a production consultant? Would you want to be on set?
Definitely. I think it would be cool. The question is what,
director?
Well, maybe listen, it's whoever decides to take this on. If they feel that I would either help or hinder, I don't want to hinder at all. I just want to be real, because the truth is I've seen a lot of stories about porn and they just read as disingenuous to me. And I would like it to just be genuine, just be real.
You're very convincing in the trailer, so you would even consider acting, wouldn't you? Would you play
I would.
yourself?
If someone wanted me to. I mean, look, I'm getting older, so time's a ticking. If I'm going to portray like the 30-some-year-old version of myself, you know what I mean?
Get ILM to do like not just facial aging, we'll just get them to do cock aging for you.
We'll see. But like the cool thing about this book is that, and I would also direct people towards the audiobook, which I narrated, which once the lawyers were done with it, and the text was locked, that's when I locked in and I started doing the audiobook, which was so much fun. That was a 40-day recording process, 50 days of editing. And it's just my kind of weird, man. Like, if you really want to get inside my head, spin the audiobook, because like there's one aspect about the book that makes this interesting is my alter ego talks throughout. And it's it adds a dimension to the story that makes it unique and makes it very original. Now, when it came to reading the straight read, I was 100% sober. There was no weed smoking. There was no drinking for those 37 days. However, when the alter ego's turn came, that's when I broke sobriety in a variety of ways. And there were 3 different reads during that. You know, there was the weed and wine one, which was more mellow. There was the cocaine read, which is very high energy and manic, because I did have my cocaine phase. And then when a Sunday came along, I'm like, do I have an acid read? That's a rhetorical question. Of course I have an acid read. And so I went into the closet, which was my recording studio. And for 2.5 hours, tripping balls, I read these lines, and I had a whole variety of sound bites to choose from for when the alter ego shows.
3 audio books. Like you could get like 3 different. Did you intercut them? Like different characters appear at different stages. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it was more of what was my mindset at the time. Was I more chill and laid back? Was I cocaine freaked? Or was I just kind of like, I'm in my acid phase now? Because to be honest with you, dude, I was microdosing the last couple months of my career, like literally. So I would be joyful on set because they sucked all the joy from the job. They literally did, where I had to microdose in order to be pleasant.
Was that mycelium or was that chemical?
It was LSD.
Got it.
Yeah.
And who's the they that you're referring to? Brazzers?
Yes. Mind Geek particularly. They were at the helm from 2014 to 2020, and gradually, like a balloon, like letting the air out. That balloon is full of joy. By the end, it was just like a shriveled up balloon. Like that's really where it was.
All right. So with your experimentation with hallucinogenics, in my experience, it's opened up like the cosmic mind and this realm of there is some energy bigger. Okay. How does that all flow through what, generally speaking, again, society looks at, you called it filthy,
Right. I don't know, man. Listen, look, I am a big believer. Hallucinogens for me, I had a lot of walls built up inside of me from things I experienced as a kid, losing my mother, everything else, fear of abandonment, all that stuff. And, a lot of people, they're fearful of hallucinogens, and they have every right to be, because if you do it wrong, it can lead into a very dark direction. But for me, those walls were broken down. And by doing it so much, I have become in tune with the greater universe. And it has opened my mind in so many different ways where I don't know how to answer your question, like with the whole filthy aspect of it, but I just felt like my entire existence when I was in the porn industry was exactly that. It was a filthy existence. It was a filthy, bizarre, awkward, strange existence, but that's kind of a long title. So I just went with the keyword, filthy.
All right. One more. We do have a final question. I don't know if we're there yet, Mark, but
Yeah.
I'm curious. Have you seen The Dead at the Sphere since you live in Vegas?
I did. I saw that last year when it was last July. I went to one show. I did see Fish a couple times there because they were there in April, and we were on the floor the first day. The second day we were in the 100 level, and dude, like, I'm going to the movies after we wrap this up. I'm going to go see Mission Impossible, right? When I go to the movies, one seat is my seat always, and it's dead center because audio, visually, it's perfect. So when I was there, I was looking around and I'm like, next time I want to sit up there, and it's like section 306, and that's where I was. And holy shit, was that amazing. Like, Dead & Company really knew how to use the sphere aspect of it. The only problem I see with the sphere is it's just too damn big. And to fill that many seats becomes a problem. I think what you're going to see now is like smaller spheres. Like,
they're talking about already they're going to build small ones.
Yeah, like 10,000, 5,000. I mean, probably 10,000 is where it would have to be. But if they do that, they can open it up to a lot more acts rather than, trying to fill up 20,000 seats.
Would you be interested in producing visual elements for that kind of event-based system?
Sure. Give me a call. I would totally do that. I think that would be fun. But I mean, listen, man, if anyone wants to do it, just follow like Dead & Company's lead, because they knew how, they did it right. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So we are really stoked to have met you. Good luck with Filthy and whatever's next. Stay in touch for sure. And we'll put all of this in the show notes. But we have one question that we ask all of our guests. We would love it if you would consider it. It's a really important question, and it might be a little bit off-putting. Greg?
Hit me.
All right. Eminem or Foo Fighters?
Eminem.
How come? That was so easy.
Listen, I have mad respect for Eminem. I mean, okay, look, let's backtrack a little bit, okay? So the reason why things took such a wrong turn for me, which led me into porn, was because I chose poorly again in my personal relationships. The common denominator is they're all hot and they're all amazing in bed. But that should not be the reason why you decide to shack up with someone. However, at the time, when I was living in South Florida and I had dreams of going to LA and being a filmmaker and a director and all that stuff, this hot chick that I had taken down to one of our corporate gigs was like, I'm going to move to LA. Do you want to come with me? When a hot chick asks you, you're like, yeah. And so she decided, she was a model. She was a SAG actress. She was doing background work in LA. But one day she decided she wanted to be the white female rapper. Feminem was the whole deal. And I thought it was a great idea. Now, I go back to it because Eminem was huge at the time, and I had such respect for him because he really is a good lyricist, and his delivery and his voice and all of that. And dude, lose yourself. Yeah. Won an Oscar. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do you not? And like a white dude, like Dr. Dre took him in, made him a huge success. Dre, everyone gave him so much shit for that, and he defied everyone's expectations. So because of that, no disrespect to Foo Fighters and Dave Grohl, man, he lightning struck twice for him, but it really comes down to that's my Eminem reason.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go to X or Instagram at Vic Lagina or viclagina.com. Thank you so much for joining us on this ride. It's been a whirlwind ride, Vic, and a lot of fun, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure talking to you, gentlemen.
Recording stopped.